Welcome to a very special episode of the Clyde FC podcast brought to you by A State of Mind. Joining myself and Lynn today is a man who has so many stories from his career, both as a footballer and out with, that he has decided to write a book about them. And that's just for starters. From a Clyde perspective, between 1981 and 1983, his impact at the club is still talked about by Clyde fans extremely fondly to this day. And such was his impact that in 2011 he was inducted into the club's Hall of Fame. Alongside such names as Harry Hood, Harry Haddock and Brian Ahern. He went on to play for Chelsea, Everton, Tranmere, Motherwell and earned 28 international caps, scoring 5 times for his country, representing Scotland at Euro 1992. I am, of course, talking about the Maverick, Pat Nevin. Pat, thank you very much for joining us, and how are you?
I'm fabulously well. I'm a bit tired, I'll be honest with you. I've been travelling a lot, and one of the things through this pandemic, I've been very fortunate that my job's just kept on going. Yeah. So I've been going to games, I've been going 2-3 a week, always down, or 90% of the time down south. So I live in Scotland still, but it's a lot of travelling. So having said that, having quite recently watched Chelsea win against Real Madrid and go to the Champions League final, I ain't complaining about it.
Well, quite right. Now, it's funny that you mentioned the Chelsea match. We obviously have had a busy week ourselves with Clyde. Now, it's not quite been the Champions League semi-final. However, as we are recording, Clyde did secure League One safety last night. So we'll have to settle for that just now at Broadwood. But maybe one day in the maybe distant future we'll get Champions League music played, and it's not just for a laugh on a Tuesday night. Now, as I did mention at the outset, you have released a book which Lynn's just going to hold up. It's Pat Nevin, The Accidental Footballer. So how did the book come about? Was this something that you would always been planning to do, Pat, or was it maybe a lockdown inspired moment?
No, it was finished before lockdown started.
Oh, okay.
People will be surprised to hear. No, I'd been meaning to write something for quite a long time. I'd previously written another book about psychology quite a few years ago. But the amount of people as you travelled around the world generally with commentators and co-coms and people in football, you'd sit in hotel rooms or down at the bar and tell stories. And I constantly get the same phrase, "You got to write that. You got to write that down." And I said, "Oh yeah, I'll get around to it." And I just didn't. I just waited and waited. And then somebody annoyed me one day. And I was so annoyed that I started writing. And I haven't stopped. But after about 120,000 words, I thought, why am I writing this? I better show it to somebody. Yeah. And it wasn't a planned thing of getting a book out there. But when you're over 120,000 words, most books of this ilk are about 90. So I took it to a friend of mine, and she's an agent. I've never had an agent, but she's a friend of mine. And she said, "Well, I know somebody to show that to." And I know that it's not supposed to work like this, but came back right and said, "Love that. We love that." And I thought, well, is it that easy to get a book deal? So anyway, I worked on that and sort of tidied it up and made it as interesting as possible. The weird thing is, I didn't stop then. I just kept on going. So the book actually gets to all the way to when I leave Everton. Yeah. So there's plenty more to come. But I loved doing it. And one of the great things about it was, I always get asked this question, was it cathartic? No, it wasn't. It was just fun. Yeah. And I'd never really looked back much. I'll be honest with you, people think if you're a footballer and you have this big career, you spend all your time looking back in the great times. No, you don't. You're always looking forward. And I thought at the end of my career I would look back, but I didn't. I ended up doing other things and working at TV and the media and doing other things. And I never got round to it. And then I just thought, I started writing. I thought, this is great fun looking back and remember what I really thought. And I had a couple of diaries around, so I was able to check up things. So it was completely ad hoc, unplanned. None of this, publishers coming along and messing about. And the sad thing for anyone who reads it, if you don't like it, I'm afraid I can't push it onto anyone else. I wrote every word. I can't say it was a ghostwriter and it was terrible. So it was, and I have to say, I absolutely love doing it. I've always written anyway, so that's how it came about.
Yeah, and can obviously speak from both of us here. We've both read the book, and it's fantastic, and not just from a Clyde supporter's perspective, but just if you're a football fan, we would urge you to absolutely buy the book, and you will love it. Lynn, you want to take
yeah, sure.
reins for a wee bit?
So Pat, despite the title of the book alluding to your entry into professional football being a bit of an accident, did you not in any way secretly harbour any ambitions to make that leap professionally? And because it very much sounded like football was a big part of your kind of family time growing up, etc. Like, was there a wee secret harbouring going on?
I'm afraid not.
No.
There was none. I so loved playing football. So what I wanted to do was play football. But I didn't necessarily, in fact, I didn't at all want to be a footballer. It didn't actually matter where I played. I just liked doing the thing. Mm-hmm. And there was definitely a part of me that thought, if I get a chance, I'll probably turn it down. Yeah. Purely because it might ruin the joy and the fun of it. So it never crossed my mind. But I had two older brothers who were very good footballers. And they both went into education and went into sensible jobs. And I expect to do exactly the same. Now, I can break this to you now. My older brother, Tommy, became very close to becoming a pro himself, part-time. And he went for a trial club. And it was another player was there, and he got the nod before my brother Tommy. Mm. That player was Stevie Archibald. That club was Clyde. Wow. So it could have been two NEVINs playing for the Billy.
Wow. And a big name drop there in Stevie Archibald, who himself had a fantastic career post Clyde. Not many make the jump from Clyde to Chelsea.
To Barcelona as well. There's a weird one. There's a line that I would say, it's not in the book or anything, but I actually, and if you read the book, you realise I tried really hard not to be a footballer and failed. Which is not a phrase you hear very often.
Yeah, it's very, very true with the book when you do read it. I think that's why we had to ask that question, because it was football, albeit such a hard and big part of your life, that, as you say, you just didn't want to fall out of love with the game that you did love. And
that's, the weird thing is, I was enjoying it so much, and I'd been at Celtic as an S-form, and it's a massive part at the start, explaining that they let me go, and I'm supposed to be gutted, but I wasn't in the slightest. In fact, had they offered me a contract, I'd have turned it down. I just didn't have that in my mind. I wanted to study the degree that I'd been accepted for, and that was what was more in my mind. I was just really fortunate that playing boys club football one day, I had this game, and it completely changed my life. And it was I was playing with Garrett Kosh, and we played a bounce game against what I thought was Clyde reserves. And some wee guy in the sidelines, who I later discovered was Craig Brown, was watching. And it just went from there. And I turned him down right away. And then he told me that he'd pay me. I went, oh, all right. As long as and Craig understood that because of his educational background, you could actually do a degree and be a part-time footballer with Clyde. And of course, there you go. That was the perfect option.
Yeah. So was that the perfect balance for yourself then, Pat, at that time?
It was, because, in Glasgow at the time, I had so many things going for me. I had a really lovely family. I had a lovely girlfriend I was mad about. I was going to go into a degree. That kind of future was set up. Glasgow at the time, I have to say, the music was fantastic. The music that was coming through in Glasgow, but all around was fantastic at the time. So that was my other passion. So stick football on top of it. I think Clyde played as either 30 or 35 quid a week, which then was pretty damn good. Especially as albums were costing about $1.99, and you could go to gigs and things like that, and it really made a massive difference. So as soon as I got to Clyde, I was absolutely living a perfectly lovely lifestyle. And then football started to encroach a wee bit too much. And it was a really weird thing that, I'm supposed to be excited about this. And I'm thinking, stop it. I got pulled into the Scottish under-18s team. And all the other players were all pros, like Paul McStays and all the rest of it. And they're all playing for Celtics and Rangers and all that. Spurs, you name it. And I'm like, Clyde. And I was thinking, I don't fit here. But I enjoyed playing. It was great. And it was that, the first season with Clyde, it just was brilliant. It was magical. I mean, really, I can only describe it as that. It drove me mad. I couldn't get in the team at first. And I was thinking, I was fuming because I was thinking, why am I sitting on this bench? I could be a gig, you know, especially for the night game. And I was really annoyed because, or I could be out playing with my mates at Gartcosh.
Yeah.
So it was really, I was infuriated. And Craig and wee Winker, John Watson, were holding me back, and I'm going, give me a chance. And when they did, in retrospect, it's hard to admit now, it was so the right thing. Because when they did let me loose, it was like straight into it, and I'm not coming out of this at all. I'm going to love it. And it was brilliant. I mean, what a brilliant bunch of guys that I was with, because they were all normal guys too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It kind of snowballed quite quickly thereafter, but in a positive sense for yourself, Pat. You mentioned your first season. Do you remember much about your debut?
I think it was Cowdenbeath.
I wasn't testing you there, but yes, it was Cowdenbeath.
I think it was Cowdenbeath. I can't remember if I scored or not, but I went and I run a goal scoring really quite quickly. And my whole thing was, I mean, I'd never really played wing. So I'd more been a centre or a 10. And Craig kind of just let me go. It's amazing how quickly he trusted me. And he knew that if he stuck me, basically I'd have a 7 or an 11 in my back. But I knew how to get back into the right positions and cover the spaces defensively. But when I had the ball or when we were attacking, I completely free rein. And for Craig to do that with a kid who was 17 and just new in the team, I tell you what, really impressed with Craig Brown's knowledge that he believed in me. He was right to believe in me. And you know, other people would work hard and cover you. And we had a really good team, and we won the league that season. But the weird thing is, I think I got player of the division as well that season, which was really odd. I was like, why? What? And it's the weirdest thing. I can't even remember if I wrote it in the book, but I was a terminal late comer in those days. I am totally the opposite later. So I would get the train, run down, have to catch a train for Shettleston Station, get a train to Belgrove, and then run for Belgrove to Shawfield because I was late to get to the game and play. And I was running with my bag and my boots and all the rest of the bag. And it was like so amateurish of me, but you know, I was warmed up by the time I got there. But that first season, I'm not very good with individual games. I mean, if you play 850 professional games, you don't remember them all. I can tell you one wee story from which popped up as I was driving here today, which again is not in the book, but my first goal for Clyde, and it was a Shawfield. It was a long throw by Jim Brogan. And I went, and I was at near post, over somebody's head, and I went a big swipe at it to swipe it behind me into the goal. And utterly missed it. And it bounced and went in. I had to claim the goal. Because if it didn't touch me, it's not a goal. Because it's the throw-in.
Oh, of course.
So my first ever professional goal, and my first goal for the Bully Wee,
probably wasn't.
I never touched it.
Right,
Harry Kane moment there.
I think we'll maybe just swiftly move on from that, just in case anyone wants to take a title off us retrospectively.
I suppose though, just kind of on again, Clyde, I suppose we wouldn't be forgiven if we didn't ask you about that goal that you scored at Recreation Park against Alloa. What are your memories of that goal, and have you scored many better?
No, I don't think I scored a better one. Basically, I was annoyed because we were playing in a rock hard ground and it was terrible and I couldn't kick a ball. And Celtic had come to see us playing with Clyde, and the ball just never touched the ground and you couldn't do anything. And eventually somebody must have made a mistake and passed it to me. And I was in 1.5 and I thought, oh, sod that, I'm going for a Maisie. Yeah. And I did, and I just kept on going, and including the goalkeeper. And then somebody else in the line who dived in, I dummied them and I just stood in the line. And it's like a school, like a game at school, and I just tapped it into the goal. I was thinking about it on the way up. I mean, I'm really happy there was no film of it, because in my mind it was unbelievable. But Craig Brown actually backs it up and says it's an incredible goal. Yeah. Just as I was thinking that before I left this morning, I thought, do you know what? I hadn't thought about it that much over the years. So I thought, I had a wee look around my house this morning. And... Oh.
Exclusive.
Brought a bunch of photographs.
Oh, wow.
To give you. And there's one against Alloa. But sadly, that was the home game.
I was like, oh wow.
And from that first season, there's a whole bunch of programmes. So,
That is
and also a
incredible.
great book, which I don't know if you've ever seen that, Clyde, An Affectionate History. So, if you want to give any prizes out, chaps,
Oh,
Wow,
well, Pat,
thank you very
thank
much.
you
I've
very
got a
much.
bunch of these programmes from,
Phenomenal.
We
you know,
will
the-
absolutely pass these on to the club as well.
yeah.
And put it into
Happily,
the-
they're me giving them back to the club.
Fantastic.
Wow, thank you.
So there was that fabulous memory. I can remember one thing thinking about it, because I'd been told Billy McNeil was coming. And after I scored that goal and I looked up to see where Billy was, because he was Celtic manager at the time, and he was gone. And he hadn't seen it. And I was like, great. Because it actually had crossed my mind. I thought, what if they buy me? I'm still doing my degree. Actually, maybe I could go to Glasgow Tech, do my degree and play for Celtic. That's the sort of state of mind I was in.
Yeah.
I thought this would be a perfectly sensible and reasonable attitude to have. And there was two of us felt that way. My best mate at the time, I'd become really good mates with Brian McClare, who was very similar, and he was at Motherwell at the time, and we were both doing degrees. And we just had this attitude of we're having a laugh. But that actually helped me as a player, because if you could keep that calmness about yourself and you weren't playing through fear, it could make you better. But by the end of that season, there was too much interest, and I got in the Euros with the under-18s of Scotland. That went quite well. And then Chelsea came in to buy me.
Yeah, so just briefly before we move on to the Chelsea.
Oh, by the way, I said no. For an
the first-
entire year.
First time.
Yeah.
I said, do you want to play for Clyde or do you want to play for Chelsea? Well, Clyde, obviously.
Yeah.
And for an entire year, I said, no, not doing it, not going. And I was a state of shock from probably Clyde as well, because obviously we always need the money.
Yeah.
But I had no intention of doing that at all. And so I actually turned it down flat. Just said, don't even talk to me about it.
Wow.
It's incredible to think when you put into context, obviously the clubs now. It's incredible to think that was ever a situation.
Yeah.
But by the way, I would have done it any year.
Yeah.
You know, if I'd been 17 5 years ago, I probably would have thought the same way. It's because I kept that attitude all the way through my life of do what you do, and if you're enjoying it, keep on doing it.
Yeah.
Don't chase the money.
Yeah. So,
Now you were signed by for Clyde by a fellow Hall of Famer, as you mentioned him, Craig Brown. How much of an influence did Craig have on your career? Obviously, coming to the club at the age of 17. What was he like as a manager?
He did the best thing he could possibly do with me. Left me alone. He absolutely left me alone. And it was very, very seldom gave me any advice or anything, you know. And, maybe once or twice you said you didn't have to beat that extra man part. And I'd say something like, yeah, but I wanted to. And he'd just look and sort of shake his head. And I remember maybe once or twice saying, look, as long as I'm giving you an end product, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And he knew that I loved making goals for the likes of Big Danny Masterton, who we've lost quite recently. I was down at his funeral, which was dreadful. Because the Big Dancer was a great goal scorer.
Oh.
I mean, a goal scorer that, people talk about it, and if I say this to people at bigger, more famous clubs, oh, he's a great player, he could have been at a better level, you just look at you and you think it's through rose-tinted specs. No, it's not.
Yeah.
The Dancer way, with the right situation, with the right mindset, and maybe a few less fags and a few less drinks, really, because he was lightning and a natural scorer as well. And I played with a lot of strikers through my career. Danny was up there as a scorer.
Yeah, I don't think many Clyde fans that saw Danny in his prime would disagree with you there, Pat. Sadly,
So
just before
lost.
for my time, but yeah, I mean, he's a Clyde legend, and as you say, we did sadly lose Big Danny just last January, I believe.
But it's a weird time though, because I did have one other help, which you kind of sometimes gloss over, because got Stevie Evans. Now, not Stevie Evans at forwards, Stevie Evans, the left midfielder, who I'd been at Celtic Boys Club with, and he'd been with Rangers, and he came to us. Then Tam McQueen had come with me from Gartcosh United, and there was Jerry Henry came as well. So I had a bunch of guys that I knew anyway. So the start of it was easier because you're coming in with a couple of guys that you know. And there was a couple of others on trial as well that maybe didn't really make it. But the welcome I got from the Clyde players was really great. And I can remember that team immediately. You know, I remember all the players that were playing in that team, and some of them were just really lovely players, but they had other jobs as well. Yeah. And I could go through them all, and big characters. I mean, you know, really. But I remember Billy McCall. Honestly, what a scary man. Ray at the back as well. He was a good player. I mean, Dempsey was a fabulous set forward too. Again, I wouldn't have been surprised him playing Premier League football. So I could go through the whole team, and they were like that. And then you had characters like Rob Riley, or Shyness, as he was known.
He's still the same to this day.
I know. I met him recently. It was fabulous to see him. So they were fabulous memories. And you sometimes have difficulty remembering a lot of things. I had no difficulty remembering things about Clyde when I had to write about it, when I wanted to write about it.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Unfortunately, obviously, you touched upon it. You did eventually say yes to Chelsea, and it was a short time with ourselves. You made a bit of history when you moved to Chelsea, with being one of the first players assessed at a football tribunal, and obviously that value was at £95,000. Am I correct? Yeah. Was that a difficult decision then? Because obviously you had to take into account your moving away from family, and it was then moving from part-time to full-time football, and moving away from your education at that time. Was that a difficult decision?
It wasn't.
To make?
I'll tell you why it wasn't too difficult. It wasn't too difficult because I went to the board at the college, and I had 2 years into my degree, and I said, look, I've got a year left. Do you mind if I took a 2-year sabbatical? I'll come back in a couple of years and finish it, because Chelsea had offered me this job, and I was going to miss all the exams, which meant I had to sit them on resit at the end of the summer. And if I failed any one of those 6, I was out of my year anyway. Yeah. So it was pure logic. I just thought, right, okay, I'll take the 2-year gig with Chelsea that they're offering me. I'll still take the exams on reset, because I would miss them, because I was going to the World Championships and Scotland under 20s. And it's just logic. It's nothing more than that. And of course, so I signed it. I was looking forward to, I mean, I love London anyway. I'd been quite a few times, and I loved the music scene and all that. And it was no consideration that I would get in the first team quickly, or maybe even ever at all. When I was taken down there, I was a punt for them, really. And then I can come back from the World Youth Championships, and then I went down to Chelsea and trained. As soon as I started training, I thought, actually, this will be okay. I'm not certainly out of my depth here. And then the manager started talking about first game of the season. I said, well, I can't play. I'm doing my exams. And he just looked at me and went, are we serious? Because they'd been trying to talk to me for a year, so they knew I was kind of weird from their point of view. And he just said, oh, all right then, do that. So I did the exams, passed them all, and played in the reserves for the first game. But within a month or so, I was in the first team, which I have to say surprised me, shocked a lot of them, and it just went. It's like Clyde, you know, first season at Clyde, player of the tournament, you know, player of the league. I got Young Player of the Year the next year. Got to Chelsea, get Player of the Year first year. And you're thinking, this is a piece of cake. This game, God, it's so easy. And it was, and we won the league that year, and we got promoted into the top division. So it was a very, very incredible start to a career. But even then, weird though it seems, I was still being the accidental footballer, because I wasn't convinced I would go to stay after that 2 years. I was thinking I might, you know, nip back up the road, and it was my mates and my friends and the life that I had back there.
Was there at any point, Pat, did you sit and maybe just after a game and pinch yourself that after 3 years had no real major intention of becoming a footballer, that you're playing for a massive club in London such as Chelsea, you're then going into the top flight in England? At any point did you just sit back and go, what has happened here?
No, I did not. No, you just walk forward. You just play forward. And because I had this different mindset, which I've tried to explain, and it's taken me 120,000 words to explain to people, that I had this drive to be as good as I could, and a massive drive to be as good as I could. And it's an odd dichotomy where I cared about being as good as I could be. But did I care if I won things, or if I had a great career, if I was famous? Or no, I didn't care at all. And kind of still don't. It's just do what you do, try and enjoy what you're doing, and be the best you possibly can. And they are incremental steps. I'll accept they were very quick incremental steps and surprisingly, shockingly quick incremental steps. But I don't ever think there was a point because, when you're young, 9 months is a long time.
Yeah.
That's a season. That sounds like nothing. But when you're young, it's another game. It's another game. You don't sit back and think. So I never did. I just cruised along. And I loved the idea of just cruising along and being like that. Others in the game didn't get it, and that's why, at Chelsea, that nickname of weirdo stuck for a while. Well, I spent my time saying, no, I'm normal. You lot are all weird.
You're the weirdos.
And you did get it. And being an outsider is tricky. And if there's anything in the book, there's no message. There's no big message other than to anyone who's an outsider out there. It doesn't matter what business you're in, what part of life you're in, if you're at school or if you're doing a job, if you can be yourself and be comfortable in yourself, that's the best way to be. See, trying to fit in and trying to be somebody else, look in the mirror and it's somebody else that you see. I don't see that as a good thing. So I just continued to do that, and that's kind of what I've said in the book. I've not said it outright in the book, but it comes through in the book of just continue to be yourself. And I try to help as many people along the way who were, I kind of collect waifs and strays, mostly because I'm one, as my friends. And there was quite a few footballers that I worked with through the years that I was able to say, look, I'm different, I'm all right, you can be yourself.
Yeah, I think as far as a message goes, there can't be much more positive and a better message to portray.
Yeah, absolutely. Just on Chelsea again, and this is a very loaded question, I apologise, but how would you rate your 5 years there?
That's a brilliant question.
Oh, is that okay? It's like that's quite all encompassing.
I've never been in, yeah, but it's great. I never thought about it in those terms. Because I had standards that I'd kind of push myself to. So we get to the top division, and for 2 years, we didn't have a chance of winning the league. And we've come from nowhere. And we've bought a lot of players, like myself and Kerry Dixon, Dave Speedy, and, who'd went on to become internationals quite quickly. So we suddenly became this incredibly decent team who were put together on a shoestring. But we would end up coming in sixth, I think, the first season. We've got it with that. I mean, immediately you're thinking, well, we could do better than that. Only sixth in the top division in England. That shows you the mindset that you immediately have because you want to be a winner as well. I managed to get to player of the year twice in my 5 years there, and I think I was runner-up 2 of the other seasons as player of the year. I did create a lot of goals. My goal scoring was really good for the first 2 or 3 seasons. But last season or two, we changed style, and it didn't suit me. So there's a big disappointment there, and I don't hide that in the book. Yeah. But I try to explain the reasons for it. I despaired of the style. And what we had in Scotland, we were much more cultured as a footballing nation than the English. And people think that's really odd now to look back, but up in Scotland, there was a bit of long ball game going on, but we also wanted to play. Yeah. And I'd grown up watching Celtic, and they were a damn good team, and from the Lisbon Lions and Jinky and all them to the Quality Street kids, Kenny and McGrain and Hay and all the rest of it. So I'd watch pure quality with really complex. And I'd been a bit of a student of the game as well, so I loved Ajax and what was coming through in Dutch football and all the rest of it. And then we get a new manager at Chelsea. I just hoof the ball in the middle. And I was like, what? No. We're living in the dark ages here. And of course, which didn't suit me at all. So when you ask the question, how do I feel about it? There's always that tinge of sadness that at the end of it, my last game for Chelsea, we got relegated and I left. I was leaving anyway. But I'm thinking, that team I'm playing with here, we're actually good enough to be in the top half. Yeah, easy. But because they changed this to this stupid Charles Hughes long ball thing. Yeah. Whereas, and I always try and explain it to people in England, and they wouldn't listen. I was saying, look, everybody else in the world's laughing at you. We're all going ahead technically, tactically, and style-wise. Yet they're still, look at it, Wimbledon win their FA Cup. There's still some good teams down there. Liverpool were a great team. Man United for a period of time were a very good team as well. But a lot of the other teams are just imbecilic styles. Yeah. And it's fine. If it works, it's fine. It's good. I wouldn't open, if they were playing at my back, I wouldn't open the windows to watch, the curtains to watch them. But that was beginning to come into the game. And so in the end, there is a sadness.
Yeah.
That when I left, I left. I would have stayed
Yeah.
because I loved the club, and I still do. That's my team down south. But there was a sadness. But they've always stayed kind to me, and they've always been very accepting and always welcoming me back.
Yeah. Was that, when you say there was a tinge of sadness there, obviously that kind of encompassed around a change of management at that time as well. Do you feel that change in tactics kind of obviously was as a result of that, and that you weren't being listened to in that front?
Well, not even listened to. It's just the style changed, and the style did not suit me.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you're going to just get the ball, I've at one point been told, if you take any more than 2 touches before you get it in, I'm going to substitute you.
Yeah.
When the day that was said to me, I thought, well, I'm leaving.
Yeah.
I'm off.
That's not for
I
me.
completely and utterly ignored the advice and said, no, I'm not having that. So, you know, it sounds a wee bit arrogant, but no, it wasn't having that. What I didn't know, and I couldn't know, because it never happened before, is that would be a theme of my career. And indeed happened in the next 2 clubs after that as well, where you have a great start, you have 2 or 3 years and it's going fantastic. Something happens, manager changes, style changes, and either the style changes or the new guy just wants to change the team. He wants his people in. And when you're in the midst of it, it's hard to stand above it and see what's happening. When you look at it retrospectively, you think, actually, that completely and utterly changed what you would have done in your career. And one of the lovely things I often say to people, that have a look at people's career, footballers' career that have had long careers. I mean, I was 19 years in the end. Look at the alternative career. What you would have done with other decisions and other choices. So, you know, I went Clyde, Chelsea, Everton, Tranmere, Kelly, and then Motherwell. Yeah. It could have been, that's Celtic to start with, it could have been Dundee United from Clyde. Yeah. They'd come in maybe at the same time. When I left Chelsea, it was PSG.
That's right. Yeah.
When I left Everton, it was Galatasaray. You know, Celtic had come in a load of times. West Ham were interested. When I left Tranmere, I had options as well. You know, could have went elsewhere. And even at the end of my career with Motherwell, Dundee were desperate to take me because one of my best mates, Verno Benetti, had taken over at Dundee. So you have this alternative career that never happened. And you never know if it would have been better, worse, or whatever. But you don't sit and worry about it. But what does tend to happen is when change happens, it often affects players. And we kind of forget it. We don't notice it because if you're a fan, you just love your team, don't you?
Yeah.
But it impacts individuals all the time.
Yeah.
So was the start of your Chelsea career similar to how you were managed by Craig Brown, per se, and that there was less onus on instructions for yourself? It was just go play your game, Pat, go and do what you do best. And then obviously laterally when the management changed, as you say, 2 touches, get the ball in, there was more control on you.
Total structured. Yeah, totally. It becomes structured. There was a line, I was probably in the team at Chelsea. I mean, remember, I'm a kind of wee, skinny wee guy from Glasgow. It was a bit weird and sitting reading Dostoevsky in the corner. and the manager's coming in and he's done the team talk and I'm got my headphones on. With the first person to ever get a Walkman. And I'd take them off 2 minutes before a game. And the manager would finish the team talking and say, you go there, you do that, and we'll play this and play this. And if you give the ball to Pat, you'll win. That was team talk to me. If you give the ball to Pat, you'll win. Mm-hmm. Now, to say that puts a lot of pressure on me. Mm-hmm. How did he know I could cope? And I'm thinking, yeah, all right, cool. But also, how did he know the players would cope and not be annoyed? Mm-hmm. Well, how come he, teacher's pet over there, gets that? But that was the thing, the manager. Again, I try to think of how many times I was given advice by the manager. But like my father, those 2 managers, and that was John Neal after Craig Brown, they understood me better than anyone I had before, which was they believed in me, but they also knew that I was incredibly hard on myself. So if I had what everyone thought was man of the match performance, I'd walk off a wee bit gutted because, hey, I should have made 2 more goals there and I didn't get the ball quite right in. Yeah. So I was incredibly hard on myself. So they didn't actually need to be hard on me. And they got that really quickly. But there was a couple of things, again, a bit in the book where the manager took me for a game of golf. And I'd never played golf. My first ever game of golf at St Andrews Old Course, standing. And it's
not a bad start.
It's a nice story, you know. I could hit a golf ball because you learn, if you're Scottish, you learn how to hit a golf club. I'd never played in a course though. And he explained through that why I was so fortunate that I never got nervous, because other people's nervousness affected them. And that was the biggest piece of advice I think that manager ever gave me, is don't lose that. It's a special quality you've got. And I never have. Nervousness is... I've never seen a point. I've never taken myself seriously enough. The whole concept of nervousness, I always think from my point of view. Now, I understand people just suffer from it, and that's the way it is. But my point of view is, people would say, oh, what, you get nervous? What if you miss a penalty? I'll laugh at myself. I'll find me funnier than anybody else will find me. I just think I'm a kind of stupid, risible guy sometimes. Yeah. I'm quicker to laugh at me than anybody else. And I was quite laughable because I come across as quite austere and quite earnest when I was younger. And then you get to know me, and I was like, don't be daft. I mean, Brian McClare, my mate, was exactly the same. Everyone thought he was this big, deep, intelligent guy. And I'm thinking, what, Chalky? He's daft as a brush. But, you know, so it's a really good thing to have. Management is all about, and this has nothing got to do with football. This has got to do with business, life, anything. It's about maximising the potential of the people you're working under you, right? Mm-hmm. And how you do that is different from every person. The best managers know that every person has got different ways to be managed. Yeah. And I always felt the good managers knew that. Yeah. Whereas the poorer managers, of which there are many, and I would argue most at the time, I think they just have one method. Yeah. And they just go down that route. And that's what I considered an average to poor manager. But I was very fortunate with Craig, Andy Roxburgh as well, and certainly the first manager at Everton was exactly the same, Colin Harvey, and John Neal down at Chelsea. Yeah. It's a brilliant thing to have, but you don't always get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice wee drop in there of Everton. Now, Everton are my my English team, so Pat, being both a Clyde and Everton man, it's great to have you on to talk about the Toffees as well. How did you enjoy your time? Now, it was obviously a mixed bag at Everton as well. Similar to how Lynn asked you, how would you rate your years at Everton?
The first thing, the sad thing was we went there and it was unbelievable. Our first game, we beat Newcastle 4-0 and we were brilliant. And we brought a whole bunch of new players in, to myself and Tony Cotty, Stuart McCall, Neil McDonald. Soon afterwards, we got quite a few other decent players. I mean, Norman Whiteside was a fabulous player. Martin Keelan wasn't a fabulous player, but he was a fabulous marker. A really fabulous marker. Yeah. So you had everything there for a team that could challenge. We were a better team than my Chelsea team, miles better team. But it didn't work. It didn't gel. And we started the first 2 or 3 games and I was absolutely on fire. And then I snapped a cruciate. Or I didn't. Brian Rice did. Cheers, Chipper. Seeing as we were both S-forms at Celtic, he didn't mean it. He couldn't tackle a fish supper. But it took a while for me to get back. So only 3 months. It's supposed to be 9 months to a year. It took me 3 and a bit months. And by the time I got back, something had happened. There was a schism in the team. And we got to the FA Cup final that year. I scored the winner in the semi. I scored the winner in another semi a few weeks before to get us to one of the other finals. So I'm still playing well. I'm still at the top of my game, but I'm thinking, we're like only top 6 here. This is rubbish. Yeah. And it stayed that for a while. And I couldn't understand why this whole group couldn't gel and couldn't work together. But however hard the manager tried, he just couldn't get this to work together. And Colin Harvey had blue blood coursing through his veins, with a little bit of green of Celtic, it has to be said. But he was utterly in love. He cared nothing of himself. Nothing. No ego that you could spot. And it devastated me that it didn't work for him to the level it should have worked. Now, if you fast forward after our time there, about 6 or 7 years, we were brilliant in comparison to the next team, because we were doing much better than the teams that followed us. Yeah. But what we were following is a team that had won European trophy and won the league a couple of times. So that's who we were compared with. And I was perfectly happy with that. There's lots of really good, positive memories, but the stuff that I've been writing about Everton, I actually think it's quite interesting, because I think it's an angle most people won't see.
Yeah.
You know, a different viewpoint of what it's like to be within that. And Howard Kendall, who's no longer with us, comes in, and Howard and I just didn't get on at all. We had nothing in common. Funnily enough, after I left, we got on great. So it was the stress. It was the stress of, look, he didn't rate me, and I didn't particularly rate what he was doing, and you know, that kind of ruined it. And I stayed a year too long. I just thought, I'm going to show you how good I am. This noble attitude.
Yeah.
Wrong. I had clubs I could have went to, and I should have done it, but I loved Everton, and I loved the people. The fans were brilliant to me, because the School of Science, they love players that are technical. So the Everton fans, just like the Chelsea fans, to maybe slightly lesser degree, because you know I hadn't got player of the year and stuff like that, but the Everton fans were phenomenal to me, and they backed me so much, and that was hard to take, because not winning trophies, because it was all about winning trophies with Everton. We had to win trophies, but getting so close. I think it was 3 finals with Everton in different trophies. Lost all 3 at Wembley, 2 of them after extra time, and you just thought we came so close. I mean, particularly the FA Cup final in '89. We get beat 3-2 after extra time by a brilliant Liverpool team. In the year of Hillsborough. And I mean, they were a brilliant team. They were possibly the best club team in world football for a period of time there. And we were that close to them. And we really were that close to them. But that close still means failure. And that's at that level. So, again, I walk away saying, I love my time. I love the people. I played with some great players. I was getting better as a player myself. I probably hadn't peaked yet. But by the end of it, the last year, I was hardly getting a game, even though I was playing my best football. So that's all tinged, but it's not all negative, because you've got to remember, I played a hell of a lot of games. I scored a good few goals. I created a lot of goals, and we won a lot of games, and we were unbelievably close to being a challenging side. So you've got to see the positives of it. And what a cheek you've got if you walk about saying, oh, that was terrible, when, wait a minute, you're paying me to kick a ball. Get that right. Just anytime you think in a downer like that, just get that in your head.
Perspective.
You're getting paid for actually something you love, and that's what I always felt about it.
Yeah, it's a privilege, and I think over the last year it's probably driven that home, I think, to most, just how much of a privilege football is for us.
Definitely.
Looking back in your time at Chelsea and Everton, you must have come across some fantastic players. Who would you say was the toughest opponent?
The toughest opponent, simple, it was myself. It's your own head. That's all it is. I love playing against best players. That's all I wanted to do. I wanted to play against Paul McGrath because he was brilliant. In training, I would make sure I played against Martin Keelan because he was the best marker in the business.
Have you still got bruises to this day?
He'd get really angry because I just play right up against him in the 7-a-sides, and he'd go, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I beat you." And he was, if you beat him, it was worth it. There's other players, many players, possibly even most players. It's not a big deal in beating them. I know how to beat you. I mean, they come around towards you and you think, right, I've beat him already. Who's next? And he's not even reached you yet. You know, because when you can be like that. If you ever watch, I was trying to explain this to someone the other day. If you ever watched when Eden Hazard was his best, or I'm not saying I'm as good as these guys, but you know the guys that can ground people, I can see it when the balls come to him and there's a guy around towards him. I know that feeling of, right, I've done you. What's the next one? And he's not reached you yet because you've positioned your body and you've positioned him and you've got everything where you want it to be. And it is a fabulous feeling. It's something I'm very fortunate to have, mostly because I'd learned how to play without looking at the ball. So if you don't look at the ball, you can look at everything else, so you know what you're doing. If you watch, say, Phil Foden now, never looks at the ball, but lots of players do. So I looked for players that had that. So I worked for a while with Peter Beardsley, and put him in the modern game, and he's playing for Man City, and he's that good. Norman Whiteside was a brilliant player, any position. And he's a very, very misunderstood player. But I mean, I'm so lucky 3 of the years when I played with Kenny with Scotland. I mean, I'd gone from standing on the... oh God, I've got a story to tell you. I don't know if I mentioned it, but there was one game I didn't play for Clyde. I didn't turn up. If you remember that. I don't know if I put it in, I can't remember. I might have taken it out
No,
again.
I don't think so.
No, I didn't think so. All right. So I was playing every week, but I got ill, and it must have been a Wednesday night game. It was a Wednesday night game, and it was down at Stranraer. And
I don't blame you already.
I wasn't feeling great. I was really a bit rough, and I just thought, I got in touch with Craig and I said, I can't make it. I'll let you down. And he said, that's fine. So I went to watch Celtic instead. Celtic Rangers game.
As soon as you started that.
Now, to be honest, I probably wouldn't have done myself justice or the team justice. But that might be a bit of an excuse. I'd maybe talked myself into that, and it was Celtic played Rangers, Celtic won. I was really happy about that. Anyway, there was great players that I'd watched through the years, but then you got to play with some amazing guys who I love. I mean, I love playing with Stevie Clark. Stevie Clark and I had a great understanding. Massively underrated player. Playing with JC, John Collins, with Scotland. Him and I and McStay. There was quite a few periods when I could have went to Celtic, and that would have been brilliant fun because they were quality. Tam Boyd was behind them, so there was a kind of that would have worked. I think it would have worked really well, but it never quite happened. But with lots of us, I played with John Aldridge at Tranmere, best goal scorer. I mean, unbelievable, just world class goal scorer. But the joy of it was seeing you play 7-a-sides, and this is a secret people don't know about football, right? It's quite common. It happened at Chelsea was with Kerry Dixon. So they're the big scorer, the big name. Everybody wants to talk to them. So you play 7-a-side and you pick teams. Last pick every time. Every single time. Last pick. And it would drive them mad because they're the big name and they're the goal scorer and they're the headline grabbers. And we're all going, yeah, but you can't play. You're rubbish. All you do is you can't do
the 6-yard line
and exactly. You just we'll do all the complicated stuff. Don't you think? We'll just give it the ball, okay? And it would drive centre forwards mad. It's a really common thing in football. I've never heard anyone talking about it before, but it's really common because tactically they generally weren't that great because they just did this one thing. Whereas if you're midfield or defence, you had to have an overview of everything. They were very good at what they did, but it was very singular. And then you look at all the pundits; they're all centre forwards. But we used to laugh at them guys because they were tactically useless. It's the funniest thing. But so different players at different things. I mean, different positions. I played with Neville Southall, was in goals at Everton, and I'm honest.
Brilliant goalkeeper.
I mean,
I used to love him.
He was amazing.
I fancied myself as a goalkeeper in my younger days. And
I loved his personality as well, and also the fact that he tried to kill me quite frequently. Anytime I scooped him, he would just
run at you.
Just chase me. He chased me all the way out of Belfield training ground once. He just kept on going. So there's a 7-a-side game going on. I've scooped him, scored, and instead of going for the ball, he's just started running after me, and I went, God, he's not stopping. All the way outside training. Different class. I actually don't want to forget the fact there was another player who I really, really liked and rated very highly, and it was Tommy O'Neill at Clyde. And he was often the subject of the Boo Boys, now and again.
Right, okay.
But in actual fact, what I saw in him was someone who understood where to move. And if you made a move and you're in space, he'd find you. But also, very specifically, if he saw you on the ball, he'd think, I know what he can do. And he would move into brilliant positions and always find space. And it's a very simple thing to say, but he was brilliant at it. So you had, I just call it a football brain. And now most players have got a football brain if you're a pro, but there's other levels beyond that. And Tommy was one of the first ones as a player that I'd come on. I thought, right, that's somebody I can work with. And I'd mentioned Beardsley. So Beardsley and I, it was such a shame we never get a chance to play with each other long enough. But if I get a ball, Beardsley would just make these wild runs thinking, Pat will find me. And I loved it. And I would do exactly the same. And also he was very skillful as well. So the real joy of being able to play with players like that was absolutely fantastic. But you'll notice I've mentioned a few names, but there's not really that many. There really isn't that many. And I think it was specifically because of English football had gone this direction where those types of players were kind of being pushed out. And it kept on going for years. I mean, the start of the Premier League I thought was rank. Oh, Robert, I thought it was rubbish. I really thought it was
It
poor.
was the imports that probably helped.
Exactly.
swing
They were the guys who could do that. So you had to bring in a Zola, you had to bring in a Cantona, you had to do that. So those are the kind of players that I kind of was very fortunate to play with, but I'd like to have played with more.
So on an international theme then, moving away from club football, it's a big summer ahead for Scotland. Yourself, as we mentioned earlier, Pat, accumulated 28 caps, I believe, 5 goals. How do you think the international team are set for next month's Euros, or delayed Euros, I should say?
I think with what we have got and the standard of the players we've got, we can't be any better because you've got Clarkey there. Now I'm biased, own up to it. Clarkey and I have been mates for forever, since we were 21. But he's as good a coach as you come across. And I knew that years and years ago because you don't get to work with, Liverpool, Chelsea, Newcastle, and the people that are there unless they don't do you that as a favour. They do that because they rate you. Mourinho rated Clarkey really highly. So did Rudd. So did Kenny. He's top quality, right? Yeah. If we don't get through the group stage, it's not his fault. Because he will get the best out of that group of players. So I'm quite excited about it. I'm particularly excited. I don't want to annoy too many fans out there. I'll be there at every game. And it makes people jealous. I've got this glorious, fortunate life where I'm a Scotland fan, but I get to the games even now, and I'm at the games, and I'd never take that for granted for a millisecond. But the way the group's put together, getting the best out of a number of people. Clarkey had a number of things he had to do. He's desperate to get McTominay in midfield, but he might have to stick him at the back. And if he can get a way that he can get McTominay in midfield, he had to find a way of getting the best out of Tierney.
Yeah.
And he did, but without losing Robertson.
Yeah.
And that was a conundrum that was killing everyone because we put Tierney in the right and stuff like that, which was a waste.
Yeah.
But he's managed to do it. So if Tierney's back and fit, I think that's a big one. I think I often tell people I spend a lot of time down south, a lot of time at Chelsea, and the 3 players I've told to buy over the years. And I just said, look, listen, please. And Tierney was one of them. And just said, I think he's the best in business. Yeah. And I don't think there is a better left defensive player that I would buy more than him. I don't think there is a better one. He is the best.
Fantastic.
So talented.
On the Chelsea side, Billy Gilmore is he's a talent. Do you think this is just going to come too soon, or?
I'll trust in Clarkey's judgment.
Yeah.
But if it was me, he'd be in the squad.
Yeah.
Just now, even if he doesn't play, it doesn't matter. Billy will be a big part of the future of Scotland. Yeah. So get him in, get him be part of the group, get him working with everybody. Let everybody understand within the group, oh my God, he is good.
Yeah.
He doesn't give the ball away. He's a great passer. He can control games. He does all that sort of stuff. So Billy's special. He's also a great lad. And it would help because if we leave it until after the championships or another year and then bring Billy in, he then has to do the bedding time. And that sometimes takes a wee while. And I don't want it to take a wee while. It'd probably be all right, but you'd rather get it done, get it out of the way. I mean, I remember when I was in Scotland, we would often bring young players that were up and coming, that were obviously going to be good enough. And I remember a young Duncan Ferguson being brought in, which was mental. But he had to learn how to fit in, which he didn't, in the nicest possible way. Yeah. But for me, the nicest, I thought he was hilarious. But it helps a wee bit. So with Billy, I'm not sure he'll be starting. And in fact, I'm sure he won't be starting. Yeah. But there's a couple of extra gaps in the squad. Yeah, I think it's
three extra places. I think
I can't see that you. I know he's not playing every week, but for goodness' sake, you've got Jorginho who in front of him, who if he wasn't playing for Chelsea, Man City would buy him tomorrow morning. Yeah. You've got Kante, who I've watched recently, and I swear to God, he's a freak. He's an utter freak. I've never seen anything like it. I mean, I know we're talking about Billy, but I watched him playing. And do you know when you say, "Oh, so and so's a great player"? He's just like, and you mention, no idea with Cantona, with him, Kante, no idea. I don't know who can do that. I've never known anyone do it, and he does this weird thing at the moment. He can dribble like Eden Hazard. Yeah. He can he'll go in with 4 people who are going for the ball, and he'll be the only one in a blue shirt, and they're all at 6 foot. And he will walk out with the ball afterwards, and three of them will be in a heap, and you'll go, how did you do that?
Yeah.
And I've come up with a theory, and I think it might be true. I think, you ever read the Harry Potter books or watch the movies, right?
Harry Potter books.
And Hermione's got a time turner, where she can live in the future or the past.
Yeah.
I think he lives slightly in the future, right? So he knows everything that's going to happen just before it happens. And I think he's got one of them, and he uses it during games. So he's got that. Kovacic was Player of the Year last year. It's not that Billy's not good enough.
Yeah.
It's that he has got unbelievable Mason Mount,
Yeah.
jeepers.
Yeah.
So he's got world class players. You stick him in just about any other group, in the Premier League, and he's playing every week. Yeah. So I haven't watched him. There was a game up really early days before his famous breakthrough game at Liverpool, and Chelsea were playing up at Newcastle, and I was covering a game for, I think it was 5 Live, and I ended up sitting. It was downstairs at the end of it, and Billy's sitting 15 yards away. I've never met Billy, and as he walks by, Chelsea get beat that day, the Newcastle, the bogey team. He walks by and I went, hi Billy. And he went, hi. And I don't know if he knows me. But obviously Scottish, I've seen him in the telly and all that. Yeah. But I said, we could really have done with you today, mate. And he went, I'm not joking. We could have done with you. And this was before he did that. I'd watched enough of him, I'd seen enough of him. They weren't controlling midfield. He was on the bench and unused. He's that good. Now, I'm not clever. People in Scotland knew this years before that. People at Rangers knew that years before that. So Billy, I hope it does happen. It's going to be tough. It's a tough group, and in the England game. But I would never write us off. The spirit we've shown, and I'm not just under Clarkey, under Strachan as well. Yeah. The spirit's been great.
And hopefully, signs are looking good to maybe getting some fans in as well.
I'm excited about that. I mean, as everybody is. I mean, it makes a big difference to us if we can get games at Hampden Park when we've got everybody behind us. Yeah. I mean, even if I know we need to play at Hampden Park, but
I know
I would just rather it was somewhere else, especially if it's 6,000 or 10,000 fans or whatever. Yeah. If you played at a smaller ground,
Castle somewhere,
it would be fabulous.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, you mean Easter Road, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very conscious here of time, Pat. I would just like to again thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.
All the best for the book, The Accidental Footballer. I do insist that you should buy it. If you're watching this, please buy it. It's a fantastic read. It's a great insight, and it doesn't even begin to scratch the surface of what we have covered today.
We haven't even done the music yet.
I know, we didn't.
No, we never even got to music, so we'll just need to get you back on, Pat, and we'll do a follow-up. Just very quickly, do you have a quick message for the Clyde fans? Obviously, we are the Clyde FC podcast, so just a wee message for the fans.
Well, it's funny because it never leaves you. If you play for Clyde, and lots of people that I've worked with through the years, it never kind of leaves you, and it's a joy when I go back. I don't get to go probably very often, but it absolutely never leaves you. And the joy of I'm watching Chelsea get into the Champions League final, but Clyde are safe, and it feels the same. Honestly, it feels the same, and you do have that thing, and I'll never forget what the club gave to me and the opportunity the club gave to me. And the springboard that it gave to me. And to be fair, of all the things that I've sort of won in my career and done in my career, see being given the Hall of Fame with Clyde, I'll have to say it. And my heart was swelling at that moment. So to be in there, thanks to the Clyde fans. Thank you so much, and don't ever stop supporting the club.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Brilliant. Again, Pat, thank you very much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure. I can't wait to release the episode. We could keep going, but unfortunately there's a queue waiting for the studio. So all the best for the book release, Pat. I'm sure it'll be a great success. Yeah. And yes, until next time, we will be back again on the Clyde FC podcast. And until then, come on the Bully Wee.